So he's seen everything, and he's brought some samples of stuff that can go wrong. So just living off that experience is you know, that's great. Are we ready, lady? Could you do me a favor and get those 2 light switches off those right there? Very good. Okay. So we did washing. Now let's go on to drying. And this right now is how people are drying. And these are all professional dryers. So some of the companies that you probably buy product from are using facilities like this. Some of them are old tobacco barns, and I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. But now that we have raised your awareness, you're probably going, ooh. So maybe some of you were at an event that we held in this room 2 years ago, and we had this same discussion, some of these same pictures actually, and we had our new food scientist, Eduardo, there, because one of the issues I'm having, so we did work in my project on dryers a number of years ago, and we designed dryers. But now I'm no longer pleased with those dryers in terms of energy use and efficiency, or what the products are used on the inside. But okay, I'm not an engineer, and I never want to be in a project designing dryers ever again. You know, you're out there, you're doing something that you have no training for. It was crazy. But I had gone looking for something that we could line our dryers with, to line those wooden walls so that we could wash them if we had to, or should, okay? And I could not find a product on my own that I could see would be safe under high temperatures. So I could find all kinds of stuff that you could use for restaurant walls and inside food processing facilities, or inside, even the inside of the facility that you make your tinctures in. But I have yet to find one. And when I called the FDA, they said use stainless steel. And I'm looking at the size of that card and going, oh man, I'm going to have to sell a lot of herbs. Stainless steel is not practical. So I've asked Eduardo to look for either a material that won't outgas at those high heats, or some kind of paint, because the other thing is you often have those supports. You know, how would we go about that? These we would change. These would come out, and I would put food-grade screens in there. That's not a problem. But what's holding them up? Well, I guess maybe I'm going to have to use metal. But the walls, what do we do the interiors with? So that's the question I don't have answered, and I have to call Eduardo. And yes, Andy, what did you learn in your YouTube videos?
No, this is a question.
Oh,
so if
darn,
you
I thought you had the answer.
If you're starting out fresh, you have raw land, you have not built anything, there's not a barn. What would you build if you had it all to do over again now? That's where I'm at.
Andy had the money.
Yeah.
Ed, have you seen anything that you think is totally...
You mean the dryer?
Yes.
That the inside can be totally... Now, there are some of those ginseng dryers, the insides of those walls were metal, but they weren't stainless.
They're food grade dryers. Proctor Silex makes it very expensive, but it's a food grade dryer with a free pass, so it's stainless steel.
Yeah. These were the dryers that I was recommended that we should be looking at. Yeah.
You said high temperatures for the dryers. What type of high temperature?
Oh no, we're talking anything over ambient.
Okay.
So we're talking up to 100 to 130 down where you guys live 130.
What about glazed tile?
Expensive.
The grout, would that hold bacteria?
It doesn't even, so tile, so dryers, okay, you need to think, most of the amounts that we're growing, when we're doing 10, 30 pounds, we can build a little something. But when you're selling to someone like Ed, you need a dryer that's like, see this section here? You need dryers that are big, because it's amazing that wet material dries down to such little stuff.
Yes.
Okay, you need big dryers, and I don't know how to really size those. You could get more help from Ed on that. But so the tile, I think, would also be too expensive. Nancy, what are you guys figuring out?
Okay, I figured this one out. We haven't gotten to this at Appalachian Botanical yet. They're still working on this, but what I did do in my own time was I bought a 8x10 metal utility building at Lowe's off the parking lot, and then retrofitted it with PVC shelves, cattle panels, and vinyl screening. So I've got 80 square feet in my 8x10 shed. I use box fans.
Do you know everything in there is okay at temperatures over 100 degrees? That is the issue I ran into when I started talking to the food safety people, is how many plastics will do that, and then with the metal, a lot of those are the galvanized stuff, and how that reacts with a lot of the sanitizers. Did
I do bad then? I mean,
I don't know. This is where I just came up with this list of questions.
Even the paint that's out there, you know, Eduardo, one of the issues I have is the paints, some of the paints that are food grade that you can go in and paint can't take the higher temperatures, over 120, I believe it is, something like that.
And I think we need to be able to do
the
at least
volatilization
130.
is the problem. You don't want that going in your herbs. So like, we're using the paints on the cool bots, you know, for the small farmers, the ones, the lower temperatures, not a problem. We've got all these great little pull behind bots, you know, to cool things down, herbs and things down. But we can't, the temperature, we don't have a paint.
If you reverse that, I know somebody who uses a cool bot to drop. They just basically, they reverse it.
They reverse it. Now, I've got somebody doing that too.
Right.
But again, with the temperature.
But a lot of them are made with wood originally, and wood's porous. That's the problem.
Well, we use galvanized, but we don't dry over 100 degrees.
And I'm surprised you can get away with that, because the project we worked on together in the Piedmont region, we often had to push that temperature up to 130 in order to get things to dry. When you get really, really, really humid.
We have a dehumidifier, so that's part of it. But just FYI, it's a 12 by 16 area, and we can get 300 pounds of herb in there.
Fresh, when it's fresh. Okay. And that's, okay.
It's galvalume, which is an anodized material, so it's not, which is, I looked into this in terms of material that was affordable, and that's the only roofing material allowed in Germany because it doesn't really sink.
And what I have been told, so then you've just got to watch, when we were first building our dryers and what we used for the screens were galvanized metal screens, and I was told it was okay as long as we did not have anything acidic touch it.
And the galvalume is an anodized surface over metal. So it's an aluminum zinc alloy that that doesn't leach and is in fact resistant to chemical intrusion. It's what modern metal roofs are made.
But we've got to find out what is going to then be approved. Camille?
At one time, didn't you have a program to where a commercial dryer was put onto the back of the truck and was able to go to various herb farms for drying?
No, that's been talked about, and that's one of the things that ABBA is working on. The Appalachian Botanical Alliance that Amy Hamilton now is with. So that's her, you know, she was part of our original drying project. And so this is her thing, is she wanted to come up with a portable unit. What I'm looking at right now are peanut dryers. And that is what our stevia, so when we're doing stevia work, which we're doing right now, the stevia, the volumes are so huge, there's no way that any of our dryers would work. And so what they use are peanut dryers, and basically it just looks like a tractor trailer body.
Right.
And so that's what we're going to be looking into. And then it's like, okay, what would it take for us to turn a tractor trailer into one of these?
Great.
But I don't want to do that. I want the engineers to.
Are they up on racks?
What?
In the truck? Or is it just on the floor of the...
You know, I haven't looked inside on those.
Well, a lot of dryers will have one or two, a triple pass. Sometimes you put it in here and it'll go back and through it.
Oh, it's like on a conveyor or something?
Yes.
Oh.
Wow.
Like
moves. Yes.
Yep.
And also
I think that's kind of like what the one on the right does.
Yeah, after a double pass and flick the material when it goes on those conveyors, so it turns it at the same
Like
time.
the tea dryer and the tea plantation.
So just think of the volumes, and I'll bet if we looked out there, particularly in India, we would find some information on what size dryer you need. I mean, people totally underestimate this. And that's why we have pictures of people all using our dryer. Some of our early growers, the Medicinal Herbs for Commerce Project, actually they went and they harvested their acre of stinging nettle or whatever, and they were running around using dryers everywhere because they just assumed they could get that whole acre in that utility building size dryer, and it was like not even close. When it's wet, and see, that's why years ago everyone started the drying process in the field, and it all laid out there, and you turned it a few times, but now that is not considered acceptable food safety wise or for keeping the good constituents in them. Okay? Packaging.
Before you leave that, where did our Eduardo end up?
I have to call Eduardo. So you see, if I can find a grant with our Eduardo, then I'll get a lot more of his attention. And so right now, that's like a sideline project for him. I'm sure, you know, that's just how we all have to roll anymore. Okay.
He's primarily working with vegetables.
But he has a very personal interest.
He has a extreme personal interest.
And so he would love it if we got a grant.
Yeah, this maybe you've already thought about this. Are you sure there's no way we could use a kiln with any kind of a glaze? I know that probably wouldn't be practical for huge.
What kind of kiln are you talking about?
Well, you know, like they have the kilns for the pottery.
Porous.
Far too high.
Porous?
Yeah, and also too high a temperature. Yeah.
And the hot wash that's
You can
used in
control the
those
temperature.
is great.
But we don't need, you know, we only need,
But
here in the mountains, 90 to 100 degrees. We usually do it first with high airflow. The further east we get, when that humidity gets up and the temperatures get up, it's just all the physics of, to drive off the moisture, we got to get that temperature a little higher. Yep.
Is anyone called bath fitters? You know, just for an easily cleanable surface.
But I don't know if it can do the temperatures.
I gotta,
And again, I can find things that will go up to 125, but when I asked Eduardo, he said, what's the highest temperature you've ever used? And I said 130. So then there's like a certain percentage above that then that they have to say is okay. So it's like if you're 130 is as high as you're going to go, it's like he wanted us to see that it was like 160 or 175 that your products were safe to.
what about ocean-going cargo containers, using those to convert them into a...
And I've got some people using those as growing rooms for mushrooms and stuff, so I've looked in them, and that might be a possibility if we can consider that.
Because some of them are lined for food.
That is what they converted for dryers, just a perforated stainless steel or metal foil and circulation.
What was that? I couldn't hear it.
Ocean-going containers, the ones they stack on boats.
What do they line them with? For food?
Different ones. They have food-grade containers.
But again, it's whether
What's the lining?
I have no idea. I just know they have them, because
But some of them have just used it with the metal, thinking they can clean the metal just fine. So then we go to the packaging and the storing and the shipping part. This is where you've got to have conversations with your buyers, because in my experience, everybody wants it packaged differently. It depends on where it's going and its final use. You know, I saw this with hops this winter. Depending on the brewery, how those hops were going to be added to their vats made a difference as to what kind of containers they were put in. So do this checking. Do you need poly bags? These great big super sacks? Can they go in boxes? Now here, this grower, the buyer wanted super sacks, but his farm didn't have any kind of equipment to properly handle those super sacks, so he put them inside of watermelon boxes. And then he had the right equipment to handle it, so that was how he dealt with this. This was part of our Medicinal Herbs for Commerce project. We were working with a lot of tobacco farms. I forgot to put my microphone back on. Is that going to be okay?
I would use it for the video.
Huh? For the video? Okay. And so that was how they packaged tobacco. That company came out and designed this box for us to use for our herbs also. Okay. So find out what your buyer needs, and then make sure that you have purchased these materials way before you need them. Because sometimes it takes a little bit of work to find them. Like if you've got somebody that wants those big cardboard drums, they're not something that anybody in town is going to have. This is keeping the good records all the way through your process. And Ed's going to address some of this with specifics and with some examples. All the way through, and I give details on this, you should be keeping records of where you have planted or harvested from. I now know some wild harvesters that go ahead and do the GPS coordinates just in case something were ever to come back that something was wrong with that sample, even if they didn't need to go back and trace it back because someone got sick, that harvester would know where that problem was and not harvest from that same area again. Keeping track of what you have put on that crop, what you've used on the soil, what you have applied, if you've used any kind of pesticide or fungicide type product, whether it's organic or not, what has been grown on that site previously, where you got your seeds or your planting stock from. And for some things, this is important because of legally, like if you were going to sell golden seal and it was going to go to another country, golden seal is covered under the Convention on International Trade of Endangered Species, CITES. And that is going to require some documentation. And in particular, they want to know where that planting stock came from and evidence that it had been cultivated for a certain period of time. And if you don't have those records, how are you going to prove it? And if I were growing something that had that kind of limitations on it, I would also make sure that someone like my extension agent had been out there and could verify, oh yeah, she planted that in 2006. I was there. And then retain a sample. Okay, this is where you're doing your voucher. Okay, so you have your voucher. Maybe you've taken really good photographs of that you send along with your product when you sell it. But also retain some of that sample, and some people are retaining some of the seed also, although I don't think that's quite as necessary. But you need to have enough of a sample there that if any testing were to be done, you could do it. And this should all, you needed some kind of filing system, and where it's dry, so that you could have a good sample. Unfortunately, we had one grower that was doing all of this part correctly, but was storing all of these records in the barn. And so there was an issue with something that needed to be tested, and when he went and opened it up, well, not only in the barn, but it was in a plastic bag. And so he just had a mildewy, moldy mess, and he wasn't able to take care of that. So think about that.
How long should we hold on to these samples?
At least 5 years is the current recommendation.
Joanne McCoy is using a Mylar bag now to put those samples in, and so that they're not exposed to the light. Mm-hmm. And she's had really good success with that and recommended it. Where we're using a big plastic Ziploc bag.
And you can store things in the dark. Now, please remember that Joanne McCoy is working on a science level. And Joanne McCoy, a lot of her vouchers need to be kept forever. Okay, so if you can afford the Mylar bags, if that's important to you or important to your buyer, certainly go for it. But plastic bags are a whole lot cheaper. So this is where a lot of this comes into, okay, this is the ideal, but do I really need to reach that ideal or pay for that ideal? So, you know, think along those lines. Yes, sir?
Are there issues with different kinds of plastics?
For storing your vouchers, well, I would definitely use something that's food grade.
Okay.
Yeah, so when I see people use trash bags for things, it raises some concerns, but I don't really know. I don't know if I'm putting those herbs in that plastic trash bag, if that's a problem or not. Do you know?
Some trash bags do contain pesticides and antifungal, well, just things to keep the bugs from getting in and smells developing.
And they wouldn't say that on the label.
No.
No, and you can buy all size of these bags food grade, but you're not going to walk into Walmart or Sam's Club, well, maybe Sam's Club, and find it. So that's something you're going to have to order ahead of time. Yeah, Laura?
Would it be as acceptable to do if you were to perform the extraction and keep
sample of that?
If I were doing tinctures and extractions and such, I would have some of the raw material, and of course I would have my product. And I would be creating lot numbers on things. Now, we can't teach you how to do that here, and I'm not the best one to teach you because I keep revamping it on my farm all the time. But if you're going to do this as a business, and if you're going to sell to a company, think that we need to be able to trace things all the way back. Okay, so there is a product that sits on the shelf at Whole Foods, and someone gets sick. We have got to find out what made that person sick. And so they're going to go all the way back down the line. And it would be in your best interest if we could take that all the way back to the field and that original seed source to find out, where did this problem happen? Maybe it didn't have anything to do with you, but the fact that you have that traceability. Yes, Margaret?
Just wanted to add, if you want kind of a visual or an illustration of how to trace the product back. There's a couple, for one company is Gaia, who does a really good job of that with their Wheat Your Herbs site. You can trace it back to the date that was harvested and the location, and they have a way of organizing their fields. So that was in zone 1A or whatever it is. But that's a really good visualization if you go to their website to look at how you can trace every ingredient from every product back to when that was.
We can all just get creative in the wintertime now. You know, I mean, what we can do with Excel spreadsheets, embedding photographs, this kind of stuff, we can invent this. We don't need some really expensive program.
It is a requirement.
Pardon me? For organic.
For organic certification.
Yes.
And it's actually a fairly simple process. Yep. Once you keep once you establish the logging process, it becomes more or less automatic, all from seed to invoice.
Yep, good point. And there are software programs you can buy specifically for organic farmers. Someone's done that work, and I don't think those are that expensive. But ultimately, you need to meet the grower's specifications. Now, this is Rick Scalzo of Gaia. Greg Cumberford is no longer with them, but I haven't updated my photographs. But this is just showing them inspecting samples that have come into them, as if Rick really sits there and evaluates all the samples. It looked good for a publicity picture, you know. Anyway, they're the ones that ultimately make the decision. They're the ones that are going to have certain specifications, and you need to know this ahead of time. When you're first getting started, there are some local manufacturers that'll buy from you, that are going to trust you a lot, to know where they can find you, kind of thing. But as you get bigger and more professional, you need to have all these guidelines met. Oh, one other point. Well, I think it was last year. I had a grower who had a buyer tell him some things that just didn't fit. It was like, oh, that's okay. You don't have to worry about that. You can do that. You know, just some things that didn't fit with all the things that this grower had been learning in our classes. And called me up and asked some questions about it. And I said, then don't go with it. If you don't feel like you are selling a safe product to that person, okay, some of those roots went moldy, so you just picked some out, but there's probably some left or something. If you don't feel good about that product, just because the buyer says it's okay, don't let it go. Because ultimately, it's your reputation.
That's what traceability is about.
Right. And there have been a few buyers out there that want stuff cheaper. I'll take it off your hands. Well, do you really feel good about selling it? Okay, maybe you dried it a little too hot. Maybe your alkaloids aren't quite as high as they should be, but you still feel it's safe. Okay. But if there's truly a potential food safety or quality issue that could hurt your reputation, don't let it go. It's your right to question that. A couple of guidelines, just a couple, particular for growers, is obtaining the proper planting stock, the right seeds. Don't buy cheap. Buy from companies such as these that have built their reputation on their herbs. Make sure it's okay to grow that crop. All right, we're dealing with a whole bunch of Chinese herbs right now. I sent a list of 50 of those to a botanist at NCDA years ago. I still question. They said they were all okay. But now that we've grown some of them, it's like, Are you sure this couldn't be invasive? Well, just because something spreads does not necessarily mean it's invasive. But, you know, I would like some of these botanists to come look at these things again. But make sure they're not on a list. Either if they're an endangered species, if you're even allowed to grow it, there are going to be rules and permits that you need. Golden seal is no longer on that particular list. And there are some things that are considered noxious weeds that might be that the industry wants, but maybe in your state, you'd be in big trouble if you grew it. So make sure you've got those legal things, and I've got links to here in North Carolina specifically where you can look that up. We're not going to cover production practices. We do that many other times, but use your very best practices. If you're growing organically, that's already being covered in your guidelines. Remember to get your soils tested. Remember, in particular, if you're using manure products, to follow all the guidelines for the manures, your 90 days or 130 days, to make sure, depending on if it's above ground part or below ground part, to make sure that that is safe. For wild harvesters, make sure about the legalities of harvesting that crop. Make sure that you're doing it in the time frames, like ginseng has harvest seasons. Even if it's on your own land, if you are selling ginseng as wild ginseng, even if it's wild simulated and you want wild prices, you can't harvest it anytime you want, even if it's on your own land. Those are the new rules that came in, what, 2011, I think it was. To sell it out of season, say Whole Foods locally wants to buy your ginseng, and they want to buy it in August. That's fine, but you must declare it cultivated, and a representative at NCDA has to come out to your property and document it and verify it as cultivated. Okay, a lot of people don't know that rule, is what I'm finding. If you're wild harvesting, look around a little bit. What is going on around that site? Think again of safety. Are you harvesting under utility lines where either herbicides are being used, or we have some buyers that do not want herb from within a certain distance of high-powered lines because there are supposed issues with the electromagnetic fields. Again, that's their choice, even if you go, oh, that's a bunch of hooey. That is, I mean, that is their right to say that that's what they want. Yes, Patricia?
Yeah, French Broad Co-op just sent out a newsletter for their annual meeting, and I saw on there they saved money for not having utility lines, you know, cut back. I said, oh, how did they do that? Well, they said they used an herbicide. So I called the company and had to find out, do a little bit of work, but they're using Rodeo and Polaris, which are both Roundup glyphosate. So,
sure, so they probably use a reduced amount that keeps it stunted for a long period of time.
But it's going to run wherever that land is.
Sure. So you need to pay attention to where you're harvesting from. Harvest in a manner that will protect the population for the future. There really are no set numbers on here. Some people say never harvest more than 15%, others say 30%. I think we as plant people know how to judge that, and in time we learn. You can look at a population and go, I can take some of that, or I look at that population and go, obviously somebody else is harvesting on this, and I need to leave it alone. Be good stewards. These television programs right now on ginseng have actually made many of our wild harvesters much more conscious of this and protecting their future to wild harvest and that of their children and grandchildren. Just the opposite of what I thought those programs would do. Sherry, you monitor some of those Facebook pages. You see them getting all upset. You put a picture of 2 young ginseng on there and they'll get on your case. And heaven forbid you post porn. Porn. Ginseng porn. Well, the ginseng porn's allowed. Okay, so that's all I've got on that section. So now we're going to have Ed come up here and talk about what's happening in the real world. I mean, with what he's actually seeing. I mean, I see stuff too, but I see 1/100th or 1/1000th of what he sees. With these guidelines, when you read them over, please don't hesitate to drop me an email about things that we either missed or things that need to be changed based on, what you know. Because then I would like to publish this document for that to be out there for everyone, because I think you'll agree this is a little easier to digest than these, although these are good reading. Okay?
Well, Anthony, do you have a source for food grade bags? Or does anybody here have a good source?
ASAP.
Oh, but that's just that one, basically one size. So you're looking for a variety of bags?
I thought they had a couple different sizes.
Yeah, but they're produce bags.
They are produce bags.
Yeah, they are produce bags. Yes, there are a number of companies that sell containers and packaging and all of that, and I'd be happy to share some of those with you. Yeah.
But aren't like Ziploc food grade or?
Yes, but if you wanted to get bigger and a little more professional, like if you were doing large volumes like this. So if you're just doing little bitty stuff, sure, what you buy in the supermarket is perfectly fine. But if you want to use, say you were doing something that you wanted to get this much into, if the trash bags aren't okay, then we need food grade. And there are a number of companies out there, a lot of the container companies, that if you go looking for produce boxes and such, often will also sell bags. Okay, and then you need these. You good?
Thanks.
Here you go.
Oh, good. Forward, backward, what's the good?
The red one is a pointer.
Okay. Got it. Afternoon, everyone. I really like they said, the way this is going, question and answer session, so let's keep it that way. We just keep asking questions as we go along. So I'm sitting back there trying to delete all the slides in my presentation that Craig and Jeanine have already addressed, and I didn't get them all out, so some of them, when we come to those, we'll whiz through them. No, I think this is great. It really is. So, and also, forgive me, I've got a little bit of a sore throat getting through a sinus, so what are you doing?
I don't know.
Okay, that's okay.
You did it.
So anyway, this is just the beginning. I thought you were playing with me, baby. And I do have some samples I want us to take time to play with and show you some samples of a good dried product or a well harvested and a bad one. So anyway, Jeanine did ask me to talk about good and the bad, so I'll address that too. But to start off with, there are a lot of GAP or GACP documents, which Jeanine has talked about a lot. WHO is the one she focused on, and then the American Herbal Products Association. And what we did, I was part of organizing that. These others are, a lot of these are more technical aspect. We really wanted ours to be more from the grower's point of view. So we did this at under the Botanical Raw Materials Committee of APA, and we really passed it out to our growers.